Let's do it.
All right. Are we live? Oh, we're live. I pressed the button and then I looked over and I looked back and we are live. And Tyler, he's running late, but he is on. Hey, Tyler.
Hey. Hello.
How's it going, man?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. All right. Are you down in Florida?
Yeah. I'm in my wife and I are in the same trying to run calls. So this will be fun.
Oh, sweet, sweet. All right. So your audio's cutting in and out a little bit. So
Okay.
just want to note that. So yeah. So I'm gonna have some stuff posted on the other screen. I spent a lot of time this morning taking screenshots of all the top end function and some sales lead data. And Andrew, I think, has worked with funnel data before, so he's got a lot of input on and then we from Kaggle, is that right?
I think it's Kaggle, yeah.
Kaggle. Oh man.
Yeah, it's not Kaggle exercise.
It's like a bagel versus bagel sort of conversation, I think, for people.
All right. So some people tomato. So yeah. So we're gonna go through that because I get that all the time. Like people want to get started with Power BI and they're like, where do I get a data set from, right? And it was so awesome. Like you guys were like, oh, let me check Kaggle, and you're like, oh, here's a sales funnel lead data set, right? And
that was a pretty fun data set. I was pretty happy with how it turned out.
Yeah,
I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it was a great way to get started, and for other people watching, that's a great way too. So if you're in the audience, and I wrote this in the YouTube channel, let us know where you're watching from. What industry are you in, and if data applies, we'll try to chat about that if we've worked in that industry before. I think a lot of us, all three of us, have done mostly automotive. I've done some appliance for work, and then I did printing, SuperWide printing for a little while, where I worked on. I've got a good story about that. Why I'm passionate about data, because I was printing. I got to tell this story. I worked at PFI ViewTech, and they made these printers that. Have I told you guys this story about the printers?
No,
I don't think so.
Okay, so
how do you have so many? You have new ones all the time.
I think we all have these stories. We just don't know until we tell somebody, and then everyone's like, "Oh, that's an interesting story." And then, then we learn it was like, "Oh, I should tell that story again." But yeah, I moved to New Hampshire in the town of Meredith, which is like out in the middle of nowhere by the White Mountains. It's on Lake Winnipesaukee, and it's the last place in the world you would think a production plant for SuperWide printers would be located, right? And I went out there, and it was fascinating because they built these. They made like 2 meter wide. I think was there a 3 meter? I think they were huge, right? They were the size of a room. These inkjet printers, and they could print. They had a height sensor, so the print head, and these print heads were amazing. They could go up like 2 inches, right? And they had a height detection. So what people would do is they would take doors, send it to us, and they're like, "Can you print like photo quality on this door?" And we would stick the door in the printer, and the print head would come down, figure out the height, and put this photorealistic picture on top of on this door, right? Or what I used to do in my office there was I take the ceiling tiles out of my office, and I'd run them through the printer and print like the moon, the sun, some clouds.
What?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was so much fun. But so we're going to talk about, so there's probably audience members joining now. So they're going to, one of the things is, like, this is my favorite time of the week, as Andrew pointed out last week, because we found, the three of us, like, we're passionate about data. And if you're passionate about data too, I want to learn why. Like, put in the comments why you're passionate about data. But I just want to talk about, some of the stories that, kind of changed our lives, right? Why we're so passionate about data. And one of it is I developed a test method, right? People, do you remember like automotive, you do a test plan and then you like follow each step and
supposed to.
Yeah. And then you run through those steps, and if nothing breaks, you're like, okay, let's launch this thing. But what I developed was I called it kind of a variable test plan. I did a bunch of features, and then I used a randomizer, and I did test sequences by picking from this subset of very important features, and then this subset of very obscure features. But people would jump around, so I would create this test plan, and I randomized the steps you would take. And so it was this awesome test plan that went all over the place. And I found bugs and things that people were like, how did you come up with, this sequence? I was like, oh, it's just this randomizer, this test. But, by fixing these underlying issues, and people were like, well, nobody would ever do that. But we discovered, with testing that there was an underlying issue that could have impacted 2 or 3 other things, that when they fixed it, other things disappeared, So
race conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite.
Right, what comes first in the sequence, and so you get things in buffer and memory. So that is one of the moments where I was like, wow, seeing the patterns, randomizing test data. That was related to data too. That really changed my life. In that, I was kind of a hero. They were like, oh, this is an awesome test plan. We need you to implement this across, all these printers that are going out, and make sure we test them this way. So that's kind of my hero's journey. Is I developed a randomized testing sequence, and it was super simple. It was in Excel actually. So yeah, guys, let's start with a big bang. And Tyler, let's go to you first. And why are you passionate about data? What was the story that really changed your life?
Well, actually, recently I've started to work a lot with sales and demand forecasting. And one of the things that we've found or been looking for is mean time to failure data or reliability data. Because a lot of the parts that we sell in the aftermarket space are just parts that we're selling to the OEs, the original equipment manufacturers. Yeah. And sometimes it would be really helpful to understand when those parts typically fail, because we would be able to understand in that bathtub curve, right, how many years a typical part lasts. And we could predict far into the future what the product mix needs to be in manufacturing to ensure that we have the right amount of stock based off of the vehicle park that's out there. So I think that's just, to me, that's really cool stuff, because I like living in the future. I like understanding and predicting things. So data is one of the best ways to do that, is to be able to take historical data, learn from it, and predict out into the future, and kind of extrapolate as much as you can about what your world might look like one day.
Yeah. Now, so I'm going to counter that a little bit, because I know there's probably some people, and I've heard this too, it's scary and overwhelming, right? What data can do sometimes. So are there any moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this is too much, or this is kind of scary, this future, the unknown, or do you embrace it? You learn to embrace it, yeah.
Sometimes. I think actually the biggest thing is finding it.
Yeah.
Who has the best data set out there. Apparently, there aren't a lot of companies out there that actually have data about which parts get replaced and when on these large trucks. So I think actually the biggest fear is having this idea for a crystal ball, but not being able to find the right data that can help you actually build out your predictions, especially when there are organizational timelines behind them and deliverables.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So finding the right data, sometimes it's not there in the format, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The Kaggle data that I was looking at, it was, a big set of data, but it just didn't have the right pieces for me to finish it out, right? So, yep. And then, some data, interestingly, you have too much of, and it overwhelms people. Like IoT devices are just cranking out data, and people are overwhelmed, and they're buying more server space. and they're storing all this data, which is cool from my standpoint. It's like, oh, we have the granularity we need. Every 5 seconds we have the set of data, but sometimes you really don't need that, and it just overwhelms people. So,
or your computer,
or your computer. Yeah. We've all had our moments where like, man, this is too much.
Yeah, knowing which data to go after is probably maybe even one of the second biggest fears. Is which data do I use to be able to derive the insights I'm looking for, and sometimes it can be tough to go down a particular analysis or a particular line of analysis only to find out that it didn't result in anything. So that's where the analysis paralysis comes in, is what do I work on first that's most valuable?
Oh my gosh. So Tyler, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about data is I love learning new stuff, and with Power BI and Python and everything, it's almost like every day I can learn something new. But there are days, just like the other day, when I created that fake data set for leads sales funnel, and I was staring at the data, and I was like, how do I solve this? Like, how do I get the latest, the current stage in each step? What do I do here? Because I don't know the function. And it was probably 5 minutes, and I really had to take that, put it in Excel. And I went back to Excel, put it in Excel, looked at the whole flat file, and kind of walked through and sorted some things, and then it just sparked, right? It was like, oh, this is what I need to do and move forward. But that is a scary, I go back to a couple days ago when I was in that moment, just stuck. That is a scary moment to be in, because you don't know where you're going to go at that moment. So, so Andrew, why are you so passionate about data? Do you have a good story of something that really sparked your interest?
Yeah, I would say I really started falling in love with data when I was working in the railroad industry, which was pretty surprising to me, because I kind of entered the railroad industry after being in the automotive, thinking, railroad is ancient technology. Driving vehicles, we're doing autonomous stuff. Like, that's the cool stuff. But there was a really good opportunity that I had to jump into the railroad industry. And it turns out that pretty much any industry you go into, when you're coming from a data perspective, becomes a very, very interesting industry. And so one of the problems that I was working on is we were trying to help the major railroads figure out their capital expenditure for replacing the steel rails that they have all across the United States.
Yeah.
So first of all, I had no idea that steel wore down so quickly, and the shape that it wears down in has an impact on how much longer it can stay. Steel actually, with it being all welded together, can stretch and contract over feet, depending on how well it's tamped down and stuff. There's just some crazy physics that go on the railroad steel, that it's super important, because nobody wants a derailed train. Whenever you think of a derailment, you think of, oh no, the passengers on the train. Well, in the United States, most of our train traffic is actually product, more so than people. And if you want your packages or your automobiles or all these other things delivered on time, train derailments are a major reason why things can get delayed at the very start of the logistics pipeline there. So all of that to say, once I got into the railroad industry, understanding how all of these different things came together and how much data we had to support it from our collection systems just gave me the sense of there are so many different ways that doing this job well can positively impact other people's lives. And one of my favorite part from it all was the analysts that were analyzing this data. We had a really powerful set of software that would enable them to do the analysis on the rail and make these forecasts. But they had 50 plus parameters that they had to figure out how to just tweak just the right way. It took them years each in training to get up to speed to be able to do these analyses.
Yeah.
And it turns out through some machine learning and good data practices, we could reduce that down to only a couple of parameters, right?
Wow.
And so we could simplify their job that they were doing 50 to 60 hours a week in front of computers down to a much more reasonable sort of workload, as well as being able to train up people in less than 2 years. It would only take them a couple of months if we could figure this problem out. So yeah, I just get excited about the fact that data has the power to make jobs easier, to make life more fun, I guess, or at least predictable. So yeah, it's just a really cool thing that you can really apply to any industry, which is also very addicting.
Oh my gosh, that I think is one. Yeah, you can learn new things. You can predict the future, like Tyler's been doing. You can save 50 hours of somebody's time and be more efficient. And then, this is just a tip for the kids out there. So I started, I think it was 97, long time ago. This was high school when I was taking the SAT. And I remember taking a class on SATs and ACTs. And then I remember those thick workbooks with all the problems. So I worked through 2 of those books. And what I found was my brain was picking up the patterns. And I was figuring out which ones I was weak in. And so that was kind of, this was early on before, spreadsheets and stuff. And my brain was just naturally picking up the patterns, right? And then I found that the English side, I couldn't pick up the patterns as easily because, vocabulary, dictionaries all over the place. But the math side of things, I could pick out the patterns. And this is a tip for any parents that have high schoolers, right? I worked those books until I figured out the pattern. And then I went and took the test. And the last time I took the test, I got a perfect score on the math side, right? And that's when it blew me away. I was like, holy moly, like your brain is amazing because it can pick up the patterns. But data analytics, that in itself could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? In less student loans and scholarships and stuff. And I was like, wow, these data patterns, if you can figure them out, and you figure out where you're weak, figure out where you need to work, figure out where you're strong, and focus your study. There's money in that you could save a lot of tuition and college costs. So that was probably one of the earliest moments where I was like, whoa, data is super powerful. And you guys have heard of my, in purchasing, you can aggregate buy data if you're at a really large corporation across different divisions. And, I remember in phone calls, you could save $50,000, $60,000 within seconds. That's when data and money merged. And I was like, what does money mean at that point? When you can pick up the phone, say, I need, across 100,000 units, I need $1 off. And you're like, that's $100,000 within 2 seconds because of the data. You had to back it up, right? So
that's kind of funny you mentioned how far back you act like the seed that kind of gets planted. Because I can remember in high school, the problem solving skills were the most valuable assets that I came out of high school with. And being able to apply that to data analytics or just data in general. Yeah. I find that most of the roles that we're in, especially when it comes to data, is solving problems, problem solving, defining problems, planning out how you're going to tackle them. I don't know. I haven't been in high school in a long time, and I don't have kids, but I feel like that's one of the forgotten skilled trades that we don't really have core development on in our educational systems is real problem solving and actually having classes devoted to it, right? Because everyone says, read this book, right? And the assumption is, oh, well, I'm going to go problem solve or I need to problem solve around this test. But I don't think we actually teach real problem solving strategies in a classroom setting. I don't know. That's just my opinion, but
No, it's. I think that's a big issue, and I think data is one tool you can apply to problem solving, seeing the patterns, seeing and helping you define the problem too. You look at the data and you're like,
Right,
oh,
exactly.
this is the problem, but people have a hard time defining the problem, which is the kind of the first step, and then going and then figuring out a solution based on that. So yeah, no, I think that's a huge point. So Andrew, did you have something to show on the screen, or is that?
It might not be relevant anymore, but
Oh.
I was thinking about all of our enthusiasm that we have for data and how that can sometimes carry over and into maybe unrealistic expectations from
Yeah.
For sure.
companies, management, leadership about what you can actually do. And it always makes me think of my favorite comic, XKCD. They had this one a while back that I think they're targeting towards computer science in this one, but I think it's true for the data profession too. A person says it's about tasks and the relative complexity. And so somebody says, when a user takes a photo, the app should check whether they're in a national park. The computer programmer responds, oh yeah, sure, that's easy. Just give me a few hours. And then the person giving the requirement says, and check whether the photo is of a bird. And the programmer responds, okay, I'm going to need a research team in 5 years, right? And the subcaption says, in computer science or data, it can be hard to explain the difference between the easy problems and the virtually impossible problems to solve. And I would say this is where most of my battle scars came into play going into this industry, is just learning those lessons of like what are hard problems and what are really easy problems. And it can be very tempting for me to go after the really hard problems because they make you feel good for like accomplishing them, I guess. Yeah. But a lot of the business value is in these really easy, low-hanging fruit problems that just spending a little bit extra time trying to find those and hit those out of the park early can build a lot of confidence in the organization and provide the funding for the more challenging problems.
Future problems. You know, and I think that's one of the first things you asked me too. With Power BI, you know, you can drag and drop, and people are like, "What? Why do I need help? You know, it's so easy." And then you start asking certain things of the data, like time intelligence. Well, like, show me just last year and compared to this year. And when you start layering, and I think that's one of the hardest things about data and DAX too, is it's very abstract. When you start getting into, you know, it's kind of cool actually that data is multidimensional. But when you start asking questions of multi-dimensions and then filtering by, you know, like 3 dimensions, that's when things start getting kind of so abstract that it's hard to comprehend as a human, right? And that's, and then to get to that point, it's really difficult, and your brain gets, you know, so confused. But then people start asking why. It's like, but it was so easy the first time you showed me this report, and you just dragged and dropped stuff, and it was there. We're like, why is it so hard to take this next step and give it, you know, year over year and month over month and stuff? And you know, and and then the data modeling is a whole nother dimension. So no, great stuff. Thanks for you know, bringing that up. Is sometimes there's easy problems in data, and then I think sometimes the data comes in wrong, and there's some hard problems in AI and in business intelligence, data analytics. So, but that's a great point in that, you know, tackle some of the easier ones, get some quick wins, and you know, that'll provide you momentum and funding for some of the harder ones, and you can get more insight. So that's a great point. So. So yeah, great stories about why we're so passionate about data. And so let me go into you know, the Kaggle, right? I want to introduce everybody that's listening to Kaggle, and you know, this could be recorded too. But one of the questions I get all the time is, where do I get a good data set to do some of my analytics? And I didn't realize that this was a place, right? And you guys were both familiar with it, and you went in and, you know, I was asking about leads, sales leads, marketing funnel type data, and you guys found this pretty quick, marketing funnel by OList. And it's seems like an actual data set that they kind of anonymized from a company. Is it in Brazil?
It's in Brazil, yeah.
Yeah. And then what was really cool about Kaggle is in the data set too, this is what is missing a lot of times is, we've been talking about domain knowledge, Andrew, and what the process is, what are the steps in each, what are the stages that they go through. And in Kaggle, they define it. So go to the landing page.
Not all of them are created equal. Some of them are really bad.
Yeah, this one was amazing because they're like, oh, the first step, landing page. Then you have a SDR contact them, and then a sales rep contact them. And lead becomes a seller and starts building his catalog on O-List. So this is, I'd say 60-70% of the time, people don't know, they have the data set, but they don't know what the process is that was taken, the business process itself, which is like, man, that's one of the most critical. And what was really cool with Kaggle is this data set in particular had this. And then on top of that, they had the schema. I was like,
that's
whoa.
Pretty rare.
Yeah. And then
not even most corporations have things like that.
Yeah.
You can figure it out yourself.
Oh, Charles, you'd be real proud of the other O-List data set that's on there.
Yes, the other one's really cool. Yeah.
I've got the chart pulled up right here.
Okay. Yeah, I'll switch over. And then, this having the ID so you could flatten, unflatten, tie them together. I mean, this schema had it. I was like, oh my gosh. So let's switch over to yours. But yeah, I was so happy when I saw that. It's like, man, that if every company that I worked with gave me just those things, boy, I would get to their insights so fast instead of having to sit down and figure all that out. So
yeah, so this is also from O-List. It's a public data set on their e-commerce stuff. And I'm very new myself to Power BI. My expertise is in the machine learning or the AI type of stuff. But I was playing around with this a little bit earlier. They have this data set here, and take a look at this schema.
Wow.
So they got a bunch of different tables and all these different relationships between them. And here's what shocked me about Power BI, and maybe it shouldn't, but being a new user, it was very surprising to me. I imported each of these tables into Power BI, and it made these relationships for me. I didn't have to specify them. The only ones that missed were this zip code prefix going to a geolocation data set because it was a many-to-many sort of relationship. Yeah. And so the amount of time it took me to start looking through this data set was limited pretty much by how fast I could import the tables into it. I didn't have to spend all this time creating a schema because the data was well structured with good common names between tables that it was able to automatically pick up on. So yeah, if you're looking for some great data sets, just start playing around. It's as easy as just going up here and searching for what you're trying to do. I mean, this is how we found these two data sets looking for funnel information. But if you're looking for things in sales, there's actual competitions you can enter and win money if you do well at them. Or I even saw on here the trending one, if you care about Pokemon, that's a passion of yours, you can do all kinds of fun stuff with these random data sets that people put up on Kaggle. Wow. So whatever you're interested in, go find it, explore it.
Oh my gosh. And they have these two data sets. They're kind of separate, but in the schema, I think they said you can download I think yours was the sales you were looking at, right?
Well,
this had orders, different products, reviews associated with it. It also had information about the sellers and when things were delivered, what stage of the process they were in the delivery. So it was quite extensive. Sorry, I have to hop out real quick for just a moment.
All right. So I was just going to mention, so with both data sets, you have one data set that is kind of the order data, and then you have the data set of when the lead came in. And then you could create, I think, one of the challenges. They even give you challenges in Kaggle. They're who wants to go figure out the lifetime value of customers, right? And here's your two data sets. Have fun. I'm like, oh, that would be so useful to do that. So yeah,
I started to look at the prediction. I think there was one task on there to try and predict which leads would close.
Yeah.
So you could start cleaning and building features out to build a model around how, like, which features you would need, or which values you could use to predict whether or not a lead would close, which is where I kind of had to stop at the moment. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah, Kaggle is amazing, and we're going on a side trip, but I think this is important for people that just want to get started with Power BI and data and Python. Getting into Kaggle, sign up, download these data sets, because I've been searching for this type of website for a long time, and it's an amazing community. And what I want to show too is they give you the tables, and then there's kind of a view of the tables which is in Power BI too, but here on the website, you can take a look at the distribution of each column in the data. See how many are unique, see how many, I was like, wow, this is a really, really good data set, or a site with all the information you need to get started. So let's jump into, so I took the data and I started modeling it inside of Power BI. And here's kind of the steps I took. And Tyler, it sounds like you've done a little bit too. So I
just did it in Python.
In Python? Okay.
Just a different tool, yeah.
So maybe I'll talk about what I did in mine, and maybe your journey in Python.
I can share my screen.
I think you did. You had some thoughts too. So I took some screenshots first, but I have them open in Power BI, and we can jump into either one. But one of the interesting things was, so these were the two tables that came in. I merged them together so that I could see kind of the close dates and when they came in to the landing page, all in one table. And then I started splitting up into the star schema. I think I had actually two calendar tables. I could probably combine them into one, the dates, the close date, and when they signed up on the landing page. But then, so I merged them and started splitting out into a star schema. And here is the star schema I had started. And let me know in Python how do you work with this in Python? So for me, I just had the dates. I was trying to put the dates, close date, and sign up date in a data table. And then I had two calendars for, one was a sign up date, one was a close date calendar table. And then I did a sales rep lookup, and I was going to do a sales development rep lookup table. But kind of how do you guys walk through initial data set? So this is, for me, this is what I started with, is I just went to star schema right away, and I pulled out, I used the dates in the data table, and then I pulled out the lookup tables, sales rep, sales development rep, or closing data, or sign up date.
Here's what.
Go for it.
Is it sharing yet?
Yeah, I gotta move you over. Hold on one second. My mouse is on the other screen.
It's not too bad. It's pretty easy, but it's a little bit more writing. It's a lot. So like conceptually, it's much easier in Tableau, but so you can read in the data set. So I like to use Pandas because it looks a lot like Excel. And you just name it as an object, essentially. And then so this was the closed deals. Then your second table is the leads. So all you're doing is just reading in the CSV or the flat file. These are some of the other flat files that Andrew was talking about, but it's pretty easy in terms of merging them. All it is pd.merge, and then you name the two tables, how you're going to merge them, and on what. It's actually much easier to do in Python than it is in SQL. SQL has its own unique challenges, but I end up doing a lot of stuff in Python because I can combine my SQL knowledge and the Python knowledge, and now you have your combined data set. So I didn't create, it makes a lot of sense to normalize the data the way the way you would do it in a star schema or in Power BI.
Yeah.
But like if you're building this more for the way I was thinking about it, which was more like building data to help build a model, it made much more sense to just keep everything as is, and then you can start to clean it, all in one shot rather than having to build out the model itself inside of Power BI.
Okay. So if you scroll up, Tyler, so on that merge command there,
yes.
Right now he's got both of those tables as the full table merging across it.
Yep.
To do something more like what you were describing, Charles, with filtering down the data and creating different views, you would simply just pass in a filtered table here.
Yes.
O-list leads, you might, or closed deals, maybe you have a certain time range. You would essentially just take your table and filter down that table and pass in the filtered down version of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's not quite as easy as a user interface of like clicking and dragging and dropping.
Yeah.
But if you've got something like a Jupyter notebook here, like Tyler does, it's pretty quick to generate the visualizations once you have the code in place and just changing a few variable names to flip around between the different visualizations. So right there, funnel with the square brackets closed deal. That's a really good example of very quickly filtering down a table where he's just taking the whole funnel table that he's put together and just grabbing all the closed deals. So
gotcha. So he's filtering the full table, but then it's passing in a new table with just closed deals.
Yeah, essentially. Yep.
Okay. And then you're putting it in the chart. Okay.
This is a huge boon in Power BI because you can do this much faster.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so powerful, those softwares. But so some people prefer this, others prefer, because if you're only doing this quickly, right, and for yourself to be able to figure out the data in order to build a model, it's not so bad to just write out the code. But if you're doing something that's going to be interfacing with, a customer, an end customer, it's much easier to do in Power BI or in Tableau or whatever you want to do.
Gotcha. Now, do you do hybrid models where you do some of this behind the scenes and put it up on a server, like a database, and then have Power BI just tap in and do the visualizations?
No.
For the customer?
So I don't typically work that way. I haven't recently, like in my current job, I will, because a lot of the data sets are huge. Sometimes it's just easier to put it into Power BI or Tableau and do the exploratory data analysis just because it's easy and it's Excel-like and it has drag and drop. But if it's small data sets like these and on personal time, I typically am just more efficient doing it all within Jupyter Lab or in Jupyter Notebooks.
Oh, cool. All right, well, Tyler, you started this whole thing, remember? Because you were like, I wanna do an example for people. So this is cool. I've always wanted to, I've heard of Jupyter, and I was like, well, how is it different from Power BI and the structure and stuff? And this is cool. We're doing this live on the show, and it's an excuse for us to get together and do this. So let me just show you. So this is the model itself that I was working on, and if we go into transform data in the back end, here.
It's a little hard to read.
Yeah. So is there a way to zoom? I don't think there is.
You make the window smaller, or are you sharing like a window, or are you sharing your whole desktop?
I'm sharing my whole desktop.
Okay.
So I wonder.
Yeah, I found if I do a window, as I resize the window, it'll scale it to make it fit.
Okay, let me, what we'll do is, I did do screenshots into this PowerPoint, and I can zoom from here. So, so here's the visual that I created. What was really cool is, so here's, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So top right is just closed. I just, dragged and dropped. These were drag and drops. Like when were we, or actually these were when people were coming to the contact date or the landing page. So you could see here, it kind of leveled off. And then in December, kind of January 2018, it spiked, right? So this was kind of cool. This data set is showing that they did something, maybe some advertising campaigns between this year that really spiked and caused a lot of people to come to their landing page. And then I threw the account of by industry type because they had a tag for that. What was really interesting was home decor and health and beauty, car accessories too. It's kind of the top things that were coming in.
I thought those were pretty strange as well. I wonder why home decor made it that high as compared to everything else.
Yeah, and bed, bath, table, backpacks, sports, leisure. Are they doing something? Are they on a certain social media channel? All these questions were popping up. It's like, where are these coming from? And then sales rep ID, count of close date. So, then I was looking at who's the major closers. Who are the guys that are going out there and really closing these, right? And I'm curious to see, how many leads. Well, there needs to be more data, but why are these top sales reps? Why are they closing so many more deals? And then I wrote a time to close date diff. So there's a date diff function where I took the max contact date minus the close date just to see how long. And then I was going to go a step further and see. There's some here where they closed the same day. Some took 43 days, and there, here's one that 91 days. So you could start slicing and dicing this data to look at, are there certain industries that close faster, or what are they doing on certain ones where they're closing right away? What's the pattern here? So this was really cool. Any comments on that? I think Andrew, you were looking at
time series data is really interesting and can also be somewhat challenging to deal with because you've got this sort of dependency on previous time frames. So what I mean by that is this top sales rep here, I don't know if we've got the data on it in this data set, but maybe that person has the most closings because they've been around the longest, right? So they might actually be her worst sales rep because they've been there for 5 years, whereas somebody has just as many as them in 2 months, right? So it can be the sort of top end sort of insights are really, really great launching points, I think, for more questions. Another thing with the time series stuff is like, a lot of the questions that I get is trying to make forecasts for things, and they want to know what input variables affect the output. And one of the interesting things with time series is if you're trying to make forecasts, but also trying to influence the behavior that ends up with the sales processes, you're starting to create this feedback loop, right? Where like you're going to be really bad at forecasting because as soon as you give them an insight on how to do stuff better, hopefully they're going to sell more. But once they sell more, your forecasts are going to be off because you have no data for that new environment that the business is operating in. So time series is very, very interesting, and a lot of businesses have time series data like this. But there's some unique challenges with how you have to think about that sort of temporal context that you have for each of these data points.
No, that's a great point. It's always changing. Once you implement the feedback loops, now you got to take a whole new data set.
And I noticed that the time to close was also extremely variable. So I went to go look at, what might I use to be able to predict closing, and I noticed that, well, geez, it's going to be extremely difficult because there's such a huge tail on some of these distributions based off of the industry type, the segment. It doesn't bode well for anyone trying to predict future closing deals because it's just all over the place.
But that's a great spot for top N, right? Where you're saying, okay, where are the top 20 most, the longest sort of closing times? Because if you see 19 out of those top 20 are in the same industry,
Right.
that's a pretty clear insight that something's going on with that section of products, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's top end. We'll hopefully we get some time to get into that because we're at 45 minutes. So let me just zip through. I was frustrated because the data. Here's a funnel. If I were to create a funnel, I've been working on my own funnel. Landing page, email 1 campaign, email 2 campaign. Did they read it? Maybe pull out of something like ConvertKit, and then they sign up for a free class, and then at the end, do they sign up for a paying class? And then I did this in human-friendly format, how I would do it. And then I had the dates for each, because that was missing in the other one. When the sales development rep was assigned, when the sales rep was assigned, was there a gap between the assignments? All this data, the timestamps weren't there, is essentially what is happening. But, I've seen that in so many data sets. People create an Excel spreadsheet and they don't tag. It's not how we think, I think, humans. They don't tag each step of the sequence with a timestamp. They just go into the cell and they said, okay, we moved to this stage, and they replaced the old stage name, and then they put the new date, and all the traceability is gone.
Yep,
gone.
So many data sets like that.
Oh, and you're like, oh man, that just killed everything. So what I did is I created that data set in my human-friendly format, and then I unpivoted the dates and then the attributes. So we had by each client, this is sorted, I believe, by client. So client 1, email 2, and they're at form fill 3, and that's the latest date. And so, and then I put a funnel chart together to see the total count, right? And Tyler, this is the moment where I sat and looked at this. So I had a flat file kind of looking like this. And I was like, how do I get the latest stage? And I stared at this, and that's when I put it in Excel, and I was like, oh, I'll just do a group by inside of Power BI and merge that back in. And I had a tag on each line that said, are you the latest or not? And that's what this current phase is. So when I click on this, it filters this funnel to show me just each one at its latest stage. So,
do you think that'd be visible if you were to do the Power BI on that one?
I
think it was the other chart that was hard to read.
Yeah, was it this one right here? Right?
Yeah, maybe just blow it up a bit.
Yeah. So this is all the data. So you can see, we've had 11 people come in. We've had 9 people move through the stage 7, 4, 2. So this is kind of cool in itself. It gives you a funnel of overall data. But, I was like, well, what if I just want to see where everybody is right now? So I click on current phase, and then it filters down to, okay, of all the jobs we have open, we have 3 that have come into and I haven't sorted this yet. So, but you can then start analyzing. I think, Andrew, you pointed out, you can then see we've got the bulk of people at this step. I need to move them into here. What are some things I can implement to start moving people down into the next stage of the funnel? Or you can see gaps in the funnels where maybe this step 2 only has 1 person, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got a weakness in my funnel. I got to get people down from step 1 to step 2.
Yeah, that would be an interesting improvement to the data set we were looking at, because you're right, we weren't able to see. Well, we had first contact date, but we didn't have all the intermediary steps.
Yeah,
it would be interesting to apply the same concept to that data, and maybe fudge that and see how it works. It's interesting.
Yeah. Andrew, your thoughts? You were going to say something.
Yeah, funnel data is so interesting, and a lot of businesses, especially when you talk to business leaders, like they pick up on that stuff right away. And it's so easy to show like where things are either going wrong or where you can improve things in the process. So like whenever I look at funnel data like this, I'm thinking of 3 ways that you can increase your business's revenue. One of them is just sheer volume, right? So like, how do we get more people entering that first stage of the funnel? Because if everything else stays the same, in theory, you'll be pushing more people through the funnel and getting more closed sales at the end.
Yeah.
The second thing that you can do is increase that conversion rate, right? So for all the people that come into stage 1 of the filter, there's, let's just say 30% of those people make it to stage 2 of it. If you can just increase that percentage, if you can find a way to increase that conversion, you don't even have to add more people to your funnel. The rest of the downstream stuff comes in. And so doing that earlier in the funnel is better than later in the funnel. And then the last thing is what we've been talking about a lot is that timing, right? So how fast is that funnel operating? So looking at each person's journey through the funnel and how long it takes to go to each stage, rather than just the conversion bit of it. If you put in the sort of timing between those conversions, that's kind of that third step to increasing the closed sale part of your funnel.
Oh my gosh, Andrew, that is so awesome, because I'm just thinking through, I've been at so many companies that had capacity issues because they were like, sell. And then you get slammed.
Make through the backlog,
Yeah, and then customers get mad because you don't have the capacity. But if you understand your production capacity and you understand the funnel and how to bring people through and time it, it's like, we need to get people out of this stage to this stage right now to time, and get a certain number over so that this month we'll have these many people coming in. If you could work backwards and time all the steps, then you could, your workload, you can level your workload with leads coming through, right?
And that's where the prediction comes in too, right? Because if you say, well, I have, X%, X thousand number of leads, and I know how quickly I'm processing them, and I know and the model knows where the bottlenecks are depending on the time that the contact was made or whatever, you could be able to figure out where you need to place your workload, whether it be an industry segment or a particular type of seller, right? You could easily figure out how to prioritize your work by analyzing that funnel and getting a model built around how to predict which ones will close and how long it will take.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Tyler. I mean, like, the gut reaction to not having enough sales is we need to sell more, right, and get more people in the door. But sometimes, as Charles was alluding to, when companies do that, you end up filling up your pipeline past capacity. And that is most readily seen probably in sales, at least felt or blamed in sales. And so what Tyler was talking about, scoring your leads, right? Like that might be an initial quick way to sort of stave off that pain, is to say, all right, if we want to increase that percentage of going from, first stage to second stage, we can reduce the pressure on us to having to fill this pipeline by getting better conversions. So let's figure out which of the leads in this stage are more likely to convert. So that's where machine learning, depending on how much data you have, can come into play, where you can start scoring these leads on characteristics that you have about them and saying, okay, these are the ones that we're going to spend our effort on, because if you can increase that conversion rate, then you don't have as much pressure to fill in that pipeline. But of course, as Charles, you were saying, if there's bottlenecks elsewhere in the system, it's probably a good idea to fix the timing issue before you fix the volume issue.
Cram everything through, Oh my gosh. This is a great conversation. And I'm working on my funnel right now. I think Andrew and Tyler, you're both beta testers, and I would love to, take some of the lessons learned today and apply them, right? And maybe you guys can help too in terms of scoring. So I've got that email. You sign up on the landing page, and then you have a free class. And then at the end, I'm planning to do a call or a one-on-one call. And then the next step is potentially a paid class. And then at the end of that, a one-on-one call. And then potentially at the end of that, a consulting if you want me to help you, right? So there's this funnel I'm building out, and I would love to analyze that data and start looking at each conversion. So I'm going to collect this. It's launching soon. Andrew, you've been seeing I've been putting class courses out there on Thinkific. I love Thinkific. It's so easy to use. So we're going to get to that. Maybe in a couple months, I'll come back on the show and put that sales funnel data together and see where we go with that. So we're at 54 minutes. I want to respect
already.
Yeah. This was an awesome one, Tyler. Oh my gosh, because you had us, look at real data, real examples. I'm so glad we got to compare Power BI and Jupyter and Python. This is amazing. But I just want to show you. So maybe we'll keep top end for another show. But what I did is I put, in Power BI, I used AdventureWorks, and by country, I did the sales amount by country, all the total, and then I utilized top N to pick the three products, top selling products, filtered by each country. So this is, Canada, and then this is their total sales for Canada, and then this is just for the top 3 products. So
is AdventureWorks another software like Kaggle almost?
No, AdventureWorks is Microsoft released a data set because I think, the same question, what data set do I play with? So Microsoft said, here's a fictitious bicycle company. So you can see here mountain bikes, road bikes, which color. So they've got lookup tables with colors and stuff, and then you can download that and play with it. And a lot of videos are created on AdventureWorks, which I probably need to do a video on how to download AdventureWorks and stuff. But you can see here. So I use top N to kind of automatically filter in this table the top 3 products, and then over here just to verify the data, I use the rank sales, the RankX function. And it ranked all of them by number of sales. So 1, 2, 3. So I had this data here to verify that this was working. And then the other thing I wanted to tell the audience members and everybody about the introduction is DAX Studio. Have you guys heard of that?
No,
I have not. No.
Okay, so it's the perfect pair for Power BI because the issue with Power BI is you have scalar functions and then you have table functions or
right.
And if you have the table functions, you can never see the output of that.
Right.
It's hard to. I think there's a way to make a table and then put that function in. But DAX Studio, you just start up and then you wrap it in evaluate, and you put in your table function, your matrix function, and then it gives you the output down here. So you can visually see, instead of in your mind, having that abstract idea. Yeah, you can't see it, which is so hard for me. I was like, I need to see the function. So what you can do is you can open up DAX Studio, and it's a free piece of software made by this guy, Marco Russo at SQL BI. So I should probably put the link down here. But yeah, you can take your matrix, you can wrap it in evaluate, and then you can run it here to see what it looks like. And then over here, this is inside of Power BI. I did a top N and SUMX iterator function or CONCATENATEX. I wrap the top N inside the iterator function called SUMX, and then it summed the top 3 up. Or you can use CONCATENATEX, and it takes those 3 values and it stacks them next to each other, so I could see the 3 individual numbers, because you need a wrapper function to kind of take a look at what's in your table. So that's kind of a trick I learned in Power BI is I use SUMX or CONCATENATEX to, in each table, just take all the values and then stack them next to each other or sum them up. Yeah. So
in Python, it's one and done. You don't get an evaluate. If it works and you don't know what you just did, well, now you have to go figure out what it is before you've run the command. So.
Well, and that's exactly what I was running into with Power BI is a lot of the tables I could never see. It kind of like what you said, one and done. But I finally found this DAX Studio, and then you can evaluate and see the function behind the scenes, right? So, and it's a little tricky. So one other trick I wanted to show you was, so this is DAX Studio right here, and you can see all your measures and stuff. But when you start it, let me start it from scratch. You have to have Power BI running in the background, and then it loads the model, and then you start up DAX Studio, and let me do that real quick. So, okay, it's starting up. And then, so you can connect to like a Power Pivot model, a tabular server, but if you click on this one, if you have your Power BI open, you can select which one you want to connect to. So for example, AdventureWorks TOPN, I want to connect to that one. It connects to the model that you've opened on your desktop. So that got a little tricky for me, but if you have the model open in Power BI, then you can use DAX Studio, open it up, and then, you know, let me just see, let's do a live test real quick. So evaluate, I think values is one that I always struggled with. It's like, what does values do? So we look at product. Oops. So let's look at the product table. Oh, why is it not giving me that? I'm going to try to do this live and see what happens. Product name, here we go. So values is an interesting function because it actually goes through that whole list and gives me all the different product names without duplicates. And then
so they're distinct, yeah.
Yeah, it's distinct, and then you can put that into your other functions, like a iterator function, and then it will, like, you could say sum across these product names, right?
Oh,
so
rather than doing like group by or something.
Yeah, and then, but it was so hard for me to figure out how to use this.
Because everybody's got their own names for it, right? Like this is values, in Pandas it's unique, in SQL it's distinct.
Yep. So this one, you can wrap it into, So, you know, and I was like, values, what does this mean? And finally, when I discovered DAX Studio, I was like, oh, you can use this, and I could see the output, and I could visualize and conceptually think about it. It wasn't abstract anymore, like this fictitious table in my head with distinct values of product names. I could actually see it in DAX Studio. So,
and then is there like a doc count? Like, can you count it really easily from there too?
Yes, I think so. Count rows, right? I don't know if you have to use evaluate. I don't know if you need evaluate in front of an aggregator function. Let's try this. So anyways, you can do this inside of Power BI. So I need to figure out how to do it in DAX Studio. So what I do in DAX Studio is I figure out how the tables look, and then I go into Power BI and use the aggregator functions and wrap it around it. So that's kind of what I did, where I used CONCATENATEX or what was the other one? SUMX to kind of see, you know, wrap everything around there and see what it looked like. So
this is like a testing ground.
Yeah,
makes it easier to test. Interesting.
It's really easy to test.
Play with it.
There's some other neat things you can do with DAX Studio. So I always keep it in the background ready to go because it really helps me out. So, you know, values took me forever to figure that one out. So, anyways, I think it's been 1 hour and 3. We got a couple of viewers actually. So we're going to have to end. I'm sorry if you just joined, but this has been a great video. If you want to, I'm going to post this on YouTube so that you can watch this again. But we did some amazing analysis of Kaggle data, which you should go to if you want to play with different data sets. There's some really fun data sets up there. And then, you know, we introduced you to DAX Studio, which is an amazing tool. And then TOPN function, which picks, you know, for example, you have by country, you want to know the top 3 products, sales. You can use TOPN to wrap that into your equation. So, and then we also had a demo of Jupyter and Python.
Very brief,
Tyler. You know, and I'm thinking that was a lot of fun for me to see how it's done in some other software, because we can relate, you know, how it's done in both pieces. And I think I'm interested in doing that more often on these shows. So, so if you guys are up for it, let's do that again. So until next time, till 2 weeks from now. So we'll give us ideas, comment in the recording video. If you have ideas on a DAX function that you want us to review, or an M function, or if you wanted us to do a certain comparison between Jupyter and in Power BI, right? This is in Python, so this is pretty interesting stuff. So you guys hold on. We'll do a wrap up, and let's end this thing so people can go to lunch. Bye.
See ya.
See ya.